Welcome to the first Old Ottawa South Garden Club meeting of 2022, when Hélène Jasmine will invite us to stroll with Elsie Reeford through Elsie's gardens. Paul, please introduce our speaker.
Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year 2022. My name is Paul Ouellet, and it is my privilege to introduce our speaker tonight, my friend and author, Hélène Jasmine, who will tonight give a fascinating presentation on Elsie Reeford, a real model for gardeners. Hélène has a BA in sociology. Born in Montreal, she now lives in the picturesque village of Saint-Polycarpe in Quebec, in a historic house where she can write and cultivate her garden and numerous interests. She is versatile and her interests are diverse and eclectic. Gardening, arts, music, she plays the violin, journalism and history, among others. Author of many books, one on the filmmaker Frédéric Bach. Maybe you have seen that movie many years ago. It's an animation movie called The Man Who Planted Trees, and it's based on a book by Jean Giono. She also wrote two books on Elsie Reeford, one in 2015, a short biography in French, and one in 2019, she will talk about it tonight, entitled A Journey with Elsie, Books of Days, and it's written in French and in English. There's two different books. A jewel published at her own publishing house, La Belle Amérique. Tonight, Hélène will lead us on the enchanting and charming journey of Elsie Reeford, a remarkable woman who, in her 50s, created a beautiful garden between Quebec City and Gaspé. And it is known as the Métis Garden or the Reeford Garden, which is her family name. So Hélène, we are impatient to hear you.
Merci, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. And thank you for inviting me to tell you more about Elsie Reeford, born Elsie Meehan in Perth. So it is going to be in two parts. Part one, Elsie Meehan, who are you? And the second part, designing her gardens for 40 years. Part one, Elsie Meehan, who are you? Born in Perth, Ontario, 1872, died in Montreal, 1967. Her education, her musical studies, and her brilliant mind led her to become a woman of well-articulated opinions. In 1926, due to a health issue, she began to design her English botanical gardens in Métis. Okay. We do not have so many photos of Elsie Reeford in color, so this one is very precious. Accompanied by Elsie Reeford, who will take a stroll in her gardens following the development of her major ambitious projects. She was innovative and traditional. Her big success, you know it already, are with the Himalayas blue poppy, which became her trademark. Before pandemic, I interviewed Alexander Reeford. Here on the left, he is with our artistic director of the Book of Days. On the right, Robert Bigrat. We were in a bookstore in Montreal, about 100 people in the audience. I asked Alexander for details about his great-grandmother. First, has he met ever this lady? He said yes, he was very young and she was very old, in a big house in the Montreal Square Mile, with not much light because Elsie and husband Robert had a large collection of paintings. Better keep it out of the sunlight. I asked him questions about details such as, would Elsie, if she was in the garden now, would she use a drone to go over her gardens? He said, oh, no way. But Robert, the husband, was a gadget man, so he would be using a drone. Since many years, I have been giving talks on Elsie's life and heritage, and I published, as Paul said, a short biography in French only. But we often meet people asking for some English version. So with my associate, Michel Bill, in our business La Belle Amérique, we decided to publish an hybrid calendar notebook, A Journey with Elsie. Métis is a small community, as Paul said again, halfway between Quebec City and Gaspé. Small community on the south shore of the St. Lawrence River at the border of Gaspé Peninsula. How exotic for Elsie to start her botanical gardens so far away from Montreal. And I am asking you, how different was the world of horticulture and gardening in Elsie's days? For example, no internet to make her research, no garden centers where to buy seeds. Here we have young Elsie on the right, little sister Margaret, and big brother Frank with their mother Elsie Stephen, who was born in Scotland and came to Canada very young. You know, Elsie is turning 150 years old in exactly 11 days. So at Treeford Gardens right now, they are working on many special activities to celebrate this anniversary. A book telling about her passions, music events related to her years as a piano and violin player. Now, just a few words on her previous life before going for a stroll in her gardens. Elsie was born on January 22nd, 1872, and baptized at the Presbyterian Church in Perth. Here we have the main street of Perth at the time she was born. The Mehans were a well-known family, and her uncle Arthur Meehan opened his general store in 1848, building still existing at the corner of Gore and Foster Streets, not only serving Perth, but the whole county. Robert Meehan, Elsie's father, was a self-made man and very proud of it. Born in Northern Ireland, he came to Canada with his mother, then a widow. He will join his brother Arthur at the general store and then will go on doing his own business, buying fields and mills. If you buy one of these products at the supermarket, you are linked to Elsie. Her in-laws, the Reefords, were in import-export business and have been importing rice since 1882. The variety dainty rice has been created in 1947, and the Meehan have been selling 5 roses flowers since 1888. George Stephen was the brother of Elsie's mother, a family born in the Highlands, Scotland. Uncle George became a mentor for young niece Elsie. They had much respect for one another, and Elsie's father, Robert Meehan, will become the right hand to George Stephen, a wealthy businessman in the British Dominion. Alexander Reeford always said that horticulture was not on the top of the list of Elsie's passions. However, she liked Uncle George Garden behind his Montreal Square Mile mansion, the Mount Stephen Club, now an hotel. Also, her own father had a collection of orchids, and sometimes he would open his house to be visited by members of the Montreal Horticultural Society. This young boy is Robert Wilson Reeford, future husband to Elsie, in his hand, a canoe. All his life will have to do with navigation. On the right, his father, Robert Reeford, a wealthy businessman. He founded his shipping maritime company. He also was an agent for the Cunard. Remember Samuel Cunard in Halifax, Nova Scotia? He launched a ship using both the sails and the steam to connect North America to Great Britain, and that was in 1833. The newlyweds engaged to be married, Robert and Elsie. The big event was held on June 1894 in Montreal. Honeymoon, New York City for 1 month. All their lifetime, Elsie and Robert would travel almost every year to New York, especially to visit art galleries. Uncle George Stephen was crazy about salmon fishing. First, he built this fishing lodge in the Matapédia Valley at Kozapskal. But his wife complained it was too far away to go to church on Sundays. So he bought this large estate in Métis in 1887. He had his villa built with pine and cedar from Western Canada on the promontory, the White House over there. The Métis River and the St. Lawrence River meet nearby. Elsie would come for a holiday and shared with her Uncle George the salmon fishing sportive days. So much fun, so exciting. After the First World War in October 1918, he was retiring in England, and she received a huge gift from Uncle George, his Métis fishing lodge and a round. At George Stephen's time, only a few geraniums in pots on the veranda. So Elsie and husband decided to go for some big improvements. It will become a most comfortable resort with some 30 rooms. Every summer, the Refords would stay at Chateau Frontenac, a Canadian Pacific hotel in Quebec City, for a week or so, just to give time for their servants to prepare the villa at Métis. While Elsie would enjoy these days in a luxurious hotel, Robert would go downtown and buy paintings. They were both very proud of their painting collections. So he would buy some Cornelius Krieghoff at quite low price. Robert Reford was absolutely dedicated to his family business in maritime shipping. And he was a prolific amateur photographer. Elsie was fascinated by politics, and her dream was that husband would be actively involved in politics, even if it was only on the municipal level. Here we have the town hall in Old Montreal, but Robert said to his wife, "I'm sorry, but no." Elsie got married very young at 22. She had her first son, Bruce, in 1895. He will have a successful military career. Then 5 years later, in 1900, Eric. He will take on his father's family business. Here they are on the veranda at Esteban Lodge, from where you can have a look at the St. Lawrence River. 40 miles between the North Shore and the South Shore on this location. In 1907, Elsie co-founded with Lady Drummond the Women Canadian Club of Montreal, the WCCM, still very active. They firmly believed that women should be better informed and should play their role in this man's world. As Alexander Reford says, all her life, Elsie will be a committed activist for the voice of women in society. Some portion of the Métis River was part of the heritage, and also the Métis Falls, 121 foot high. In 1942, Elsie will have no choice but to sell the falls in order to build the hydraulic dam. This will be the end of salmon fishing on her estate. In the mid-1920s, on the recommendation of her doctor, she she has had a surgery for appendicitis, Elsie had to abandon her more favorite activities, horseback riding and salmon fishing. It was now, for her, much too extreme sports. So her doctor suggested, why not do some gardening? We launched our Book of Days, A Journey with Elsie, at Perth Museum. May I introduce now Catherine Jamison, current director of Perth Museum, and John Bufton, son of the Reford's butler. John Bufton knew Elsie and her children. He ran in her house, he played with her grandchildren, and he has a very vivid memory of details concerning their furniture in the big house in Montreal Square Mile, the dogs playing near the villa in Métis, etc., etc. And here is Ernest Bufton, father of John, butler of the Refords for more than 50 years. Born in England, 1890, he crossed the Big Pond and landed in Pointe-au-Père on Gaspé Peninsula. He will meet his future wife, who was a cook at the Refords. Ernest Bufton will become a very important man in the Reford lives. Robert Reford died in 1951. He had been a big smoker all his life. So Elsie, sitting alone in her wooden Adirondack chair, and she will keep on going to her Métis estate until 1959. After 1959, she will spend summer vacation either at Château Frontenac in Quebec City or at this castle in the Rockies, the Banff Springs Hotel, also part of the Canadian Pacific Hotels. Elsie wished she could have gone to university and learned Latin. Well, in Banff, she met a lady who has been teaching Latin. So Elsie learned some Latin and was truly happy. We all know how the Latin language is so very important in horticulture. Now we are entering part 2, designing her gardens for 40 years, starting with Giuseppe Verdi, young composer and then old conductor. According to statistics, the people who live longer are conductors and gardeners. So let us keep on gardening. Like many amateurs gardeners, I love to mix colors and shapes. Like this pair. Don't you think they are lovely? Lovely friends, I should say. Walking through the Reford gardens, you will notice some old varieties of flowers, like those flowers our grandmothers used to grow, such as malope, beautiful pink flower with its thin petals like a fine paper. When you park your car, you are welcomed by these orange and yellow marigold flowers. Such a joyful welcome. And walking to the gate, think of how it must have been hard for Elsie, a lot of patience and perseverance to create gardens from a spruce forest. But she had faith and audacity, and she dared to experiment. She began cutting down so many trees. Very soon, understood that the land was so poor. She needed lots and lots of sand and also lots and lots of peat moss. Also, she would bring lots and lots of gravel from the banks of the river. Most of her gardens were built only over 10 years. Historical gardens in the English style. At her time, we called them private botanical gardens. Near the villa, since a few years, there is a variety of Hemerocalis called Alexander Reford, a creation of hybridizer Jean Rochelot from Rimouski in 2015. And here is someone you know, Miss Isabella Preston, 1881-1965, from Lancashire, UK, who first immigrated to Guelph in 1912. Later, she will be a member of the Central Experimental Farm in Ottawa at the beginning. Elsie Rifford had much respect and admiration for Miss Preston. In the late 1920s, many hybrids would travel from Ottawa to Métis. In Elsie's private library were more and more books on nature, gardening, all well bounded and well displayed on her shelves. Elsie was working on an unlimited budget, but money does not mean success. She took her inspiration mostly from Scottish William Robinson and from Gertrude Jekyll, 1843-1932, who used to say, "There is always in February some one day at least when one smells the yet distant but surely coming summer." 1924 explorer Frank Ward was traveling far away and his eyes got caught by the loveliest blue flower, a poppy. He talked about his discovery at the Chelsea Horticultural Fair, and Elsie, always well informed, heard about this and bought her first seeds from the Edinburgh Horticultural Society. In 1936, Elsie was very proud to grow 6 varieties of poppies. She thought they would be too delicate maybe for the northern Métis winters, but sometimes sleeping under much snow were perfect for them. And 10 years later, 1946, she wrote to Frank Ward and sent him pictures of her successful varieties. He said, "I received a letter from a Canadian lady, and I understand she is very happy of her exquisite blue poppies. To walk along them must be like walking in a dream world." Here on the left, we have the Thermopylae launched in August 1868 for the Aberdeen White Star Line. The Rifford Maritime Company bought this boat, one of the fastest, the pride of the Riffords, and Elsie would receive bulbs and seeds from all over the world traveling on the Thermopylae and send in return native plants from Canada. On the right, you have the Rifford building, located in what is now Old Montreal, but then it was the business section of Montreal on Saint-Sacrement Street, still existing, near the harbor. You know, Elsie made no specific plans in designing her gardens, and she did not use specific tools. She was buying her seeds and bulbs mostly from Ontario, United States, or even Europe. In the 1930s, her estate included some 2,000 species of trees and shrubs, which is remarkable if you knew that she suffered from very severe allergies, sometimes having to stay in bed for a few days. Not many decor in her gardens, but this little angel playing music may be reminding her of her piano and violin lessons as a young girl. And this bat for birds, which is still in the gardens. Writing about her gardens in 1945, she says, "The ineffable beauty of the scene transcends time and place to bring an awareness of the eternal beyond and of a closeness to it." Building each garden, she begins by digging a trench of 3 foot deep. Then she puts big rocks, then a mix of peat moss and sand. She could also add some lime. Trees are like windbreaker in Elsie's gardens. Here we have flat rocks and trees in the background. She will mix native plants and exotic ones. She will create ponds and clear valleys. The conifers will become a barrier and give protection to our 3,000 varieties of flowers and shrubs. wearing her Wellington boots here, accompanied by her gardeners, most of them having been her fishing guides previously. Mostly all French Canadians from the area, but she speaks French fluently and German also. The long walk leading to the valley, it has been built on a very subtle slope, a 300-foot long alley and 7-foot wide, including 2 stone walls and 2 edges as tall as 12-foot high. It is the only straight line in Reform Gardens. This long walk was a very popular element in a typical English garden. No matter you walk there in June or July or August, you will be surrounded by flowers and colors and perfumes. Elsie tried to follow a timeline with the lilacs, then the peonies, then delphiniums, then lilies, then roses. Here she is, often mixing perennials and annuals. Sometimes in her soil, she would also use bone powder, very useful. And at one end of the long alley, there is the lovely orchard, much visited. Robert Trifford did take pictures of everything growing in his wife's garden, a very good inventory, and she would add her notes daily. The long walk was designed by Elsie, but her husband Robert had designed the stones. More and more tourists in the Gaspé Peninsula in the 50s and 60s. More cars on the roads, and driving near Métis, visitors were curious about this old English lady who created some botanical gardens. But the Reform Gardens were opened to the public in 1962. Elsie worked very hard on her lilies, especially on the native ones, Lilium Canadensi. She got her first ones from the Matapedia Valley, quite next door for her. Her giant lilies come from the Himalayas. They will become one of her most successful varieties. She had begun to grow them as early as 1938. At that time, there were only 90 varieties available in Northern Hemisphere. Well, Elsie will order 60 varieties. Her lilies are always combined with other flowers, either in the rock garden or flower beds, always needing to be very well drained. The Martagon variety, so exquisite. They will adapt to cold winds and salty air. In September 1928, she had planted her first lily bulbs, but she only bought 98. Remember, she was on an unlimited budget, and she will upgrade her lily bulbs to 1,000. If Elsie loves dearly lilies and roses, her husband's favorites were the lupines. He retired quite young, and then he could enjoy long stays in summertime with his wife in Métis. She was determined to create her gardens all by herself. No need for garden designers. This estate was hers, and the space was her own private playground. In 1932, she was hungry for peonies. So she bought 862 plants. As she was a serious art collector, she also became very much involved in collecting peonies. These elegant delphiniums and their deep blue color added a special touch to Elsie's gardens. Could you believe that Elsie would be poaching in the neighborhood, driving on a nowhere, telling to the driver, stop, stop, let us go, let us get some wild ferns over here. Sometimes it was wild flocks along the road. We know that on Thursday 3rd, 1933, she drove to Matan to get very high ferns. Sometimes while having a tour in the nearby country, she would get 300 plants on one day. This page stream here at the bottom on the right, coming from Saint Octave, a small village in the land, runs toward the Métis River, which goes right to the St. Lawrence rivers. She was happy to include the stream in her designs. Elsie did appreciate every style of gardens, English, French, Italian, Japanese. However, she also loved wild nature, fields as well as woods and forests. Here we have native ferns and yellow lysimax. In a way, we can say that Elsie is full of surprises in her gardens. It seems that she very well orchestrated the play of shadow and light. The stepping places we see here do not exist anymore, unfortunately. We can understand why Elsie Reford wrote so much letters and personal notes about her Métis paradise and how much she felt like a queen on her large escape. I quote her, "We go back to town in a few days, much to my regret. Paddling out these evenings into the sunset is like entering the porch of heaven." And later she wrote, "Day after day, the beauty of the whole has been unfolding. It does seem sad that not one of my family can enjoy it with me." She was always thrilled when her sons and grandchildren would visit her in her gardens. Here we have grandmother in 1935 with Robert William and his sister Marianne, uncle and auntie of Alexander. Young Robert wanted a garden with small size flowers, not more than 5 or 6 inches. It would be the Alpine Garden, which Elsie will rename the Rock Garden. Still in 1935, Elsie in the High Bank, Big Rocks, which is part of the Stream Garden. There are many small gateways from where visitors have a look at the aquatic plants. About the stream, since the 1950s, they had to add wooden walls on each side because the stream is becoming bigger and bigger and the snow melting in springtime. Here is an old postcard from Elsie's garden. She worked all her life to make her world a better place. She tried to keep faith and to cultivate optimism, even though there were wars. She knew the First and the Second World War, and in Métis poverty, sadness in every family. Now, le Jardin des Primevères, Primula Viali, Primula Glade, with their beautiful conic shapes, it is really attractive. Midsummer, when you walk down towards the Primrose clearing, you are surrounded by pink and yellow nuances. August 1936, Elsie began to dig the Primrose Garden along the stream. Here we have the conic shape ones and the Chionantha standing perfectly straight with their long stems. In the 1930s and 40s, Elsie would send letters and paper articles to the North American Lily Society telling about her experimentations in Métis. On this sheet of paper, she began with these words: "Gardeners differ from many of their fellow men in that success has at length crowned their efforts. Whatever many have gone before, trial and error, all are swept completely from memory, obliterated in the ecstasy of pure joy at the sight of plants yielding up their loveliest rewards." Elsie Rifford will become a member of many horticultural societies in America and even will be a member of the Royal Horticultural Society of London. Each year at the end of October, gardens are getting ready for the frost and snow. Elsie always felt that a big snowstorm is good for her gardens, and the more snow, the more protection for the soil. During winter time in her Montreal house, she is preparing the next season. Springtime, finally, yellow shrubs, forsythia, and the lovely crocus, spring fever. Elsie loved to be outdoors and enjoy the fresh air coming from the St. Lawrence River. Every day until 1858, Elsie wrote in her gardening journals every detail, the ritual of planting, the improvements of her gardens, the weather, the temperature. Those archives are so very useful for the gardeners still working in Métis every year. It seems that azaleas and rhododendrons are good friends, sharing the same alley. These flowers are not usually growing in northern climate, such as Métis. When Elsie first imported rhododendrons from Asia, they were absolutely unknown in Canada. They are blooming in June. In 1944, she began to add gentians in her gardens. However, these flowers will also be one of her last big work. Alexander Rifford said that this gentian alley is one of her most ambitious projects. She just loved the bright blue of those small flowers. She will write some papers on her experimentations. These flowers take their name from King Gentius in the Balkans. Since 1996, Rifford Gardens, it is now a National Historic Site. And every year there are changes and improvements. Such here, the moving day of the vigorous flowers of the agapanthus, which are either blue, purple, or white, and blooming in the summer. So the agapanthus moving day. The blue poppy may grow up to almost 3 foot. During Emperor Napoleon era, the furniture would incorporate many designs inspired by this lovely flower. Today, the villa is the place for lectures, exhibitions, and good food, very good food. Even with all the restrictions and hard times we had to travel, last summer, there were 70,000 visitors in Métis. Unbelievable. Elsie is now inviting us to take some time in her gardens, a day or two at least, or more if you can. In 1959, Elsie Rifford said adieu to her paradise. She will never go back. Her summer vacation will be either at Chateau Frontenac or at the Banff Springs Hotel, the castle in the Rockies. Her son Bruce, being the first son, inherited the Métis estate, but he did not have her money nor her passion. The estate would be sold to government of Quebec in 1961. About this, Elsie wrote to her grandson Michael, Alexander's father. The government had announced are to be kept up as formerly and the house to serve in time as a museum. I think if these plans are adhered to it all, seems better than I believed would be possible. After each talk, of course, I wish to thank the audience, like yourself tonight, and also to thank Alexander Rifford and Marjolaine Sylvestre in charge of the archives. Without their generosity, I would not be able to tell Elsie's story with so many details. So, thank you very much.